Welcome to the Just Live podcast. I am your host, Olivia Stevens, and I'm inviting you in on my personal journey of learning and discovering how to live a life with more connection, joy, and purpose. I'll be sitting down with people from all walks of life to dive into topics including trauma, mental health, mindfulness, the nuances of love and relationships, and much more. I hope these conversations empower you to expand on what serves you, release what doesn't, and just live. Hello and welcome back to the Just Live podcast. I'm your host, Olivia Stevens, and on today's episode, I have a conversation with Michael Roviello, a native of Queens, New York, who is also a U.S. Navy veteran. Michael joined the Navy in 1999, and he served as a helicopter rescue swimmer and an anti-submarine warfare operator in deployments for Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan in 2001 and Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003. After his career in the military, he had 13 successful years in the corporate world. However, during that time, he was struggling with cervical spine issues and severe chronic pain. And after fully exploring, Western science medical practices, he underwent spine surgery, was using conventional pain management and pharmaceutical intervention. He still was dealing with problems and issues. His doctor recommended a second surgery. And at that point, Michael decided that he had to explore alternatives and find other ways to heal. So he kind of went down a very long and interesting journey of exploring alternative healing methods, and that led him to the Amazon jungle, where he learned all about indigenous healing practices, and at one point was then introduced to the Wim Hof Method. The Wim Hof Method is a method that uses cold water therapy and breath work. And Michael since has dedicated himself to learning more about natural healing methods, and it has eliminated his need for any further surgeries or pain management. So he became a certified Wim Hof Method instructor and coach, and he's been teaching these techniques all across the world, and he has been committed to continuing learning wellness practices and different healing modalities that he shares with others. So I met Michael recently at a workshop that a loan officer in the area was hosting. A friend of mine sent me the invitation and said, "Oh, this looks like something that you'd be really interested in. Do you want to go with me?" And I was shocked that someone was putting on this kind of event, in the real estate industry. Normally these events that are hosted are just like typical surface level networking events. But this was a really neat and interesting experience. So excited to share it with you and to share Michael's story. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy. If you're like me and are constantly on the go, juggling work, family, and all the other chaos that life throws your way, I have found an absolute game changer that gives me some time back. Jimmy's Famous Meals is a local meal prep company that provides fully cooked, chef-prepared meals and can be delivered right to your doorstep. Picture this: no more stressing over what to cook after a long day, no more having to stop at the grocery store and wait in line after work, and you always have a wholesome, delicious meal waiting for you in your fridge. Their meals are prepped, cooked, and ready to heat and eat in minutes. And the meals can also be customized to meet your specific dietary restrictions. So if you're like me and you're doing gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, they can do that as well. So say goodbye to the hassle of grocery shopping, meal planning, and cooking, and use Jimmy's Famous Meals. Use code Olivia25 for 25% off your first order at jimmysfamousmeals.com.
Okay.
Have you done any more events like the one that I was at recently?
Yeah. Yeah.
How many of those do
Phoenix.
you do?
Well, that one I did back to back. So obviously it was two groups. As your group was the first group, the second group. And then typically I've been teaching that like once a month here in Phoenix. And then I'll often travel. Like this summer, I'll be teaching in Ecuador again. So I've taught that class in Ecuador. I've taught it in 4 cities throughout Mexico. I've taught in, New Jersey at the UFC gym. I've taught in California. I've taught at some universities, the School of Naturopathic Medicine. So a lot of different groups, a lot of different types of groups. Your
Yeah.
group was obviously like a realtor group.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. So I've been in real estate 12 years now, and I've never been one for, the kind of the organized networking events or the sponsored events put on by lenders or, various professionals in the industry, just because I feel like I'm just being sold to and they just want my business. And it's like, oh,
Mm,
here's another lunch and learn, take a sandwich, take a soggy sandwich and send me a loan, or let's do title work together. But a friend of mine had sent me the invite and was like, hey, do you want to go to this with me? I think this would be right up your alley. And I looked at it and I was like, holy shit, someone's putting on a breathwork event, like a lender is what? And ice baths and Wim Hof. And so the whole thing, I was like very surprised that somebody in my industry, one, had even really been familiar with that, or, was
right.
practicing a modality such as that. And two, that would, want to bring it to the forefront to other agents and other professionals in the industry. And I'm so thankful that you wanted to have a conversation together, because I was just so intrigued by your story and your background. I mean, somebody that's like a military veteran, that's been in corporate, that's clearly been on like a healing journey for quite some time. You've done plant medicine. I feel like you've got to have such perspective in a lot of different areas. So I wanted to hear more about you and kind of your journey, and I wanted to share it with some other people. So can you give us a little bit of background?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it was a pleasure meeting you at the center, or should I say the event. What was nice about you is that you started off the sharing,
Mm-hmm.
which was really good because you were able to openly share like your experience. And so the minute you shared, I knew that the workshop was going to be a hit because basically you started off with basically having this ability to be vulnerable, like, hey, this is what I've dealt with, this is what I'm dealing with, this is my real story. And so
Yeah.
that just kind of put everybody, I think, at ease and allowed everyone to just really take their guard down because I didn't know what to expect flying all the way from Phoenix
Right.
to an event where there's going to be, essentially realtors. I'm like, I don't know how like vulnerable people are going to be willing to be, they do business with each other.
Yeah.
There's so many elements of that workshop that's challenging. One,
Mm-hmm.
there's like, do I want to be in a bathing suit in front of people that I know? That's,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of, that's the part that no one talks about, but it's the part that's inside of people's head. And then two, of course, like the ice bath, how am I going to react to that? That sounds
Mm-hmm.
scary, not necessarily knowing the benefits of it at that point, right? Because you're signing up for the class.
Right.
And then obviously all the other elements to the workshop, which is like, sharing and stuff that people didn't even know that would be a part of it. So yeah, I just want to say thank you for doing that because that really helped to put the rest of the workshop in on a great trajectory for the rest of the day. But about my story, so I have a lot of layers. I like to tell people I live like 9 lives, but
Yeah, you definitely have.
I have, I started off on the East Coast. I grew up in Queens. I'm, from New York. I'm
Mm-hmm.
pretty much from the inner city, and I really was lacking mentorship and direction.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what really pulled me to the US Navy. I figured like there has to be something else because the types of careers that I was looking at in New York at the time, it just something about it just said, this is not for me. It's time to change your environment, trying to
Yeah.
change your way of thinking. And I got this weird kind of push and shove to just go join the US Navy. It was pretty radical because it wasn't something that I had been planning for years. I
Yeah.
wasn't one of those like young guys that was like, oh, when I grow up, I'm going to be in the Navy or the Army or the Marines.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it just happened very radically. Like 1 month I was here, and then 1 month I'm planning to leave for basically, a 5 year tour. And
Yeah.
so that was a big change for me. And so I joined the US Navy Search and Rescue Program. I was actually what they call an aviation warfare system operator, a long
Wow.
title for we flew in helicopters, we tracked submarines, we did search and rescue. We did combat search and rescue. We worked with a Navy special warfare community, which is, the Navy SEALs. We hunted submarines. We did overland rescue. We did overwater rescue. And I joined the military at a very interesting time. I joined at the end of, when was it? 1999. At the end, November 1999 is when I joined, and I was 20 at the time.
Wow.
And then 9/11 happened 2 years later. So right after I pretty much got done with all of my training, and I was actually in a position where I could do the job, I was like qualified now to do it because I had gone through all the training, the schools, there's a lot of schools in order to learn all of those different tasks. 9/11 happened. So very shortly after 9/11, I deployed and went to Afghanistan and spent about 8 months operating in what they call the North Arabian Sea.
Okay.
And it's basically right off of Pakistan and India. So it's right there. And you have to kind of fly over Pakistan in order to get to Afghanistan. And I spent a good portion of my time there. And yeah, so I had, a couple of tours, 2 deployments. I was on aircraft carriers. There's a lot of different lessons that we can, talk through in today's podcast about the U.S. Navy. But ultimately, years later, I made the decision to separate. And I wanted to, I think I was just looking for some stability. When you're in the military and you deploy a lot and you're out to sea and you're out at ship, it's like you're always pushing the pause button to your life.
Yeah.
And, it's hard to just have a regular life when you're always leaving, coming and going, coming and going. So I made the decision that I wanted some stability in my life. And that's what brought me to sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And I've been here ever since.
Okay.
And right when I got out, I needed to find work and go back to school and, integrate into society and all of those things. And so I worked for a university for about 14 years and went back to school and, finished my undergrad and then finished master's degree. And and then through that experience, a lot of things started to really come up post-military, some of it from childhood, some of it from military.
Right.
And then I really got into the world of kind of holistic medicine, alternative medicine after I had some surgeries and I had some procedures done on my spine, actually. So, yeah. So I'm not sure what direction you want to go next, but we can really explore any of that.
Yeah, I want to go back a little bit just briefly. I mean, we could have hours and hours of conversation just on your time in the military, and thank you for your service and for your sacrifice. What aspect of the military do you think had the most negative impact on you? And what aspect do you think had the most positive impact on you?
That's a great question. Um, so there's a little bit of both. I would say there's a lot of different things here. And there's so many pros and cons that came out of my military experience.
Yeah.
I'll talk about some of the pros.
Okay.
So the pros were I really lacked mentorship as a young man. And the reason why I lacked mentorship as a young man is that my father left when I was really young. And so, that has an effect on us all, whether it's your mom or your dad or, any dynamic. And when you're young and you're in the household, what I've learned over time is that essentially your brain waves are like slow and developing. And so basically, and for lack of a better word, you just like you're a sponge. You're just absorbing everything, and it's creating like your patterns, your habits, and many of your programming. Right? You hear that word quite a bit, programming. And for me, I was really lacking mentorship and discipline. And I didn't have that core element. And so I noticed that in my teenage years, mainly because of the types of activities or the people who I looked up to. And so the military was an amazing place for me to experience good leadership and then also get the opportunity to be placed in a position of leadership to see, can I make decisions that are costly, right? Because, if you make a bad decision in the helicopter community, not only will it cost a lot of money because equipment is expensive, but like people can die.
Yeah.
In a position that I was in search and rescue, I was given the responsibility to literally save other people's lives. So the responsibility was tremendous. And so you build an amazing, you just build like such great confidence in all of the programming that they have for you in the military and all the testing they're always doing. They're always testing you. They're stress testing you. They're testing you academically. They're testing you. How do you react in different situations? They're constantly seeing, are you a good candidate to continue to do this job? Can the Navy entrust in you the responsibility of the cost of the equipment, the mission, the secrecy as well? Like, do you have a big mouth, right? And obviously, are you physically fit and disciplined enough to continue to maintain a high level job like that? So I've never been tested like that in my entire life. As a young man, as a teenager, I didn't grow up in that sort of situation. So that was probably the greatest lesson, because I went from lacking mentorship and direction and confidence. I probably had a false sense of confidence, which I think a lot of young teenagers do.
Yeah.
And I found myself into a place where I had real confidence in my own abilities. Wow, I can keep up with the rest of these guys. I can be trusted with secrecy. I can be trusted with other people's lives. And so when you leave the military with that element of confidence, you feel like you could do anything. You can go into any industry. You're not intimidated anymore, because you have all this lack. And I personally had so much lack of like what the ceiling was for my career, what the ceiling was for my life. I grew up in a very blue collar type of home, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I didn't realize that you can do anything you want. You just need to learn it, and if you didn't have the information now, you can learn it. You can study it. Like, things can be learned.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like this was for other people. I had a lot of that program in my mind, and that wasn't a good program for me. So I broke just a lot of social norms by going into the Navy and learning the things that I did, doing the things that I did, and I came out with really great confidence. But I also traveled the world, and so I also want to highlight that, because I went to places I would have never just went to on vacation.
Right.
Growing up in New York, it was very common to go to vacation, like in Florida, of course, right? New Yorkers always go to Florida.
Yeah.
And you would go to the Bahamas, and it was always this like, go on vacation, hang out at the resort, don't necessarily get to know the locals or the culture or even care about the place itself. Just like have lots of drinks and party and hang out on the beach. And so that was vacation. But when I was in the Navy, I actually got to travel to all these different remote areas, all these small islands in the Pacific Ocean, all throughout Asia, the Middle East. I've been to places that no one gets the chance to go to. Iwo Jima, the islands of Midway. All these like places that you hear about in like World War II history books. I got to go to some very remote parts of Australia. I got to go to different parts of Japan and Hong Kong and Singapore and Tinian and Guam, and just very, very unique and interesting places. So when you travel, you learn a lot about yourself. You learn about other cultures. You learn about their food. You learn about, just human beings. And so that helped to really shape my perspective and my perception in a really good way. And so I would say those are two of many positive things that came out of the military. Some of the negative things that came out of the military is I was really trained I was an aviation warfare system operator. So for lack of a better word, like I was a weapons expert. We had a variety of different weapons that our aircraft carried, everything from aircraft carried everything from missile systems to torpedoes and guns, different types of like big, heavy machine guns.
Yeah.
And so strategically, your mind starts to like get into this mode of how efficiently can I destroy things? You
Mm.
know, and the more efficiently I can destroy things, the better operator that I am, because my job is to destroy things and
Yeah.
to hunt things. And when I'm competing against other people in my unit, I want to be the best hunter. I want to be the smartest guy in the room. I want to be really badass at being able to detect, hunt, and destroy things. And so that's a program that is extremely important for the job, but it
Yeah.
does not translate well to civilian life.
Yeah.
And so I had to really unwind that program, and that took some time. I also picked up bad habits in the military, everything from like go, 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 lack of sleep and recovery and rest to, surviving just on coffee and, you know, and
Yeah.
stuff like that. Just lack of, maybe what you would call like self care. And so that really gives you like your body and your mind like a pounding, right? You just pound on
Yeah.
your body and your mind. And when you're young, you can kind of do it, but
Yeah.
it always seems to catch up with you over time. And so I was running on high cortisol, high stress, high cortisol. And it was so bad that when I would take off my helmet after a flight, because we have helicopter helmets, and I would take off
Yeah.
my helmet, I would look inside my helmet and there'd be a bunch of hair in there. So I was losing my hair.
Oh my God.
And I didn't know what that was. I was just like weirded out. Why am I like in my early 20s
Right.
losing my hair already? I didn't understand stress or sympathetic tone or fight or flight or cortisol. Those words like weren't even in my vocabulary at the time. And
Right.
so for me to pull off my helmet and just see all this hair all the time, realizing that my body was trying to tell me something. And when you fly at nighttime, you have to use night vision goggles. And
Hmm.
so it's like looking through two toilet paper tubes,
Yeah.
for like 3 to 4 hours, depending on the flight. And it's very dark outside.
Hmm.
And it was a lot of strain on my eyes. And it was a lot of strain on my mind because you constantly have to be scanning and focusing so that your helicopter doesn't hit power lines or trees or anything like that, because you're flying at really low altitudes.
Right.
And so I never realized how much stress your body is in when you're doing that for 3 to 4 hours at a time, making sure that your helicopter is not running into power lines or trees, or other aircraft. Because sometimes we'd be flying with two or three other helicopters. And in training missions, you can easily get too close and bump each other, and it would be
Yeah.
devastating. Most people die in training, actually, not in war. And I remember coming home from those flights, and I would land on Coronado Island. I would drive home at night to the house I was living in UTC. This is in San Diego at the time.
Hmm.
And I remember going home and trying to fall asleep, and I could never fall asleep.
Yeah.
And I would just have broken sleep, and I would just kind of power through it the next day. And then years and years later, I really started to understand the physiology of that mental stress and physical stress and what it was doing to my body. And I had no good tools to counter, like, or even assist with the amount and load of stress that I was putting on my body for the training and then for the real world activities. So.
Right. So what did it look like then when you're realizing or recognizing, okay, there's a lot of stress that's happening here that's unfolding or that has been impacting me for years. How did you begin to kind of reverse that or, heal from that? Like what did that journey look like? And I know you mentioned earlier, and you mentioned this at the event as well, that you had a very serious like spinal cord or neck injury. When did that come into play?
So I had these weird bouts of pain that would come and go when I was in the service, and I never understood it. I would go one day where I was functional and fit and active, And then I would have like weeks where I was in a lot of pain. It was like this weird pounding and throbbing that would exist in my neck. And I didn't understand it. And I didn't have really any understanding of the body at the time. So I would
Yeah.
go to what they call sick call. And at sick call, they didn't really do their due diligence because they would have found some answers. They didn't do any MRIs or anything. What they did
Oh,
was
wow.
they just documented the pain, and they typically would give me some sort of muscle relaxer, pain pill, and when you're in aviation, there's a lot of things you can and can't take. You're not
Right.
allowed to just take any sort of medication because, it might affect like your ability to fly, right?
Yeah.
So it was just a lot of anti-inflammatory pills, Motrins, pretty basic. And so I would mask the pain with
Right.
that. And then because during my off time when I wasn't flying, we were typically heavy drinkers, right? Culturally, as in the unit.
Yeah.
So we were out and about drinking all the time. And so then I would be fine for a period of time. And it came in waves for about 3 to 4 years of my naval career. And it was
Wow.
this weird, it was just like this weird, like someone's almost like knocking on my door, but I didn't understand it. And when I
Mm.
separated, I was fine. But then early on into my separation, I started to get the waves of pain again. So I had
Mm.
resources. At the time, I was working for a university. We had good insurance, and I also had access to the VA hospitals. And so, as a young man at the time, I was just going to the different doctors, primary care doctors, VA, whoever would see me, and I would explain to them what was happening. And it was kind of the same type of care. It was like medication,
Yeah.
muscle relaxers, pain pills, anti-inflammatory. And then that escalated to like epidural injections, which is, anti-inflammatory. And then it got so bad, maybe 2 years after I separated, I forget the exact dates, but it got so bad that I was like, this is a big problem. Like, I can't function. I
Yeah.
can't drive. I can't turn my head. I was super stiff. Like, even the little speed bumps that you would go over in a parking lot, they would like
Yeah.
jolt my body. And I was like, this is not good.
Wow.
And I finally got an MRI, and they saw that I had a big problem. I had basically been losing spinal fluid, and I had something that was like choking my spinal cord.
Oh
And
my God.
so apparently messages from like my brain was getting interrupted to the rest of my body. I had spasms, I had motor control issues. I had weak hands. I was losing balance. I would be out at the bar drinking a beer, and the beer would just drop out of my hand and break because I
Wow.
would lose feeling in my hands. My hands were getting really clumsy. So even tying my shoes was becoming challenging, like weird neurological issues that,
Yeah.
once again, I didn't understand. And so, just kind of fast forwarding just through all the symptoms, basically we got to a point where they're like, okay, you need emergency surgery. And so I did the emergency surgery. They had to put like a 4-inch titanium plate in my neck, and they said that that would basically fix all the problems and the symptoms. That it was like a very easy, process in the sense of like, here's your problem,
Yeah.
and that's why this is happening, and we're going to go in there and we're going to fix this, and you're going to feel a lot better. And I was optimistic, and
Mm.
that's exactly what happened. And so I felt a lot better. But about a year or so after, I started to get these waves of the pain again, and they started
Wow.
to appear in my neck, but also other places in my back. And I didn't fully understand. And so, of course, like anybody would, you have to go back for periodic check ins.
Yeah.
I would go see the surgeon. And the surgeon eventually got to a place where he's like, okay, well, we're going to go back in. We're going to perform another surgery. We're going to just
Yeah.
basically fuse above and below where we already did. And that should fix the problem. And so that was my critical moment where I just said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go through that surgery again. I don't want to go through the rehabilitation of that again.
Yeah.
I don't fully trust that that's going to fix the problem.
Right.
And I need to just try other things. At that time, I was not living a clean life. I was drinking. I was staying out late. I was working full-time job. I was going to school at night.
Wow.
I was like, I was messy, you know.
Yeah.
Um, Looking at me from a distance, you would be like, Michael's super squared away. He's got
Yeah.
a great job. He's got a house in Scottsdale. He's in good shape. You know, he's got, pretty girlfriends. He's got a nice car. He's got a boat, like he's doing all the right things in life.
Yeah.
Internally, not the case. I was
Messed
living
up.
very sloppy, very messy, no self care, lack of self love, like just lots of issues. So ultimately, I came across a book that pointed me in the right direction and started basically the next chapter in my life, which was, I would call a journey of healing.
Yeah. And what book was that?
It was called The Mind Body Prescription. And it was by a guy named Dr. John Sarno. And this guy basically had done lots of back procedures and said, why do all these people have so much back pain and neck
Back
pain
pain.
and this pain and that pain and knee pain and shoulder pain and that pain? And everyone's just getting everyone's surgery happy.
Yeah.
Why? And the body's strong. Like, we're tough. Like, we're humans. We've been around for thousands of years. We've crossed continents. Like, why are we just like falling apart? And so that intrigued me. And what his remedy was not any of the remedies that anyone else had ever shared with me. His remedy was not go get a procedure or take a supplement or even change your diet. His remedy was in your mind. It was
Wow.
all in your mind. And it
Yeah.
didn't mean that the pain was fake, that it was pretend pain. All it
Right.
meant was if you want to get to the root cause of the pain, you have to address the mental and emotional element of the mind body prescription. And
Yeah.
that TMS syndrome is what he called it, tension myoneural, excuse me, syndrome.
Wow.
Tension in your mind will equate to tension in your body. So this was the wake up call that I had to start exploring mental health, like seriously,
Yeah.
seriously, people use the word very lightly, I think. Um, and I also had to explain emotions, my emotional health and spiritual health, which I had none. I had no spiritual health. And so that took me on a variety of different things to basically learn about the mind, the body, the connection between the two, the connection between spirit, the mind, and the body, physics, quantum physics, the cells, the mitochondria,
Hmm.
emotions, feelings, and my habits and behaviors, and how they were not creating a optimal life for me.
Yeah.
So,
It's something I've been learning more and more about too, about the connection and interconnection of the mind and the body and emotions and how it has a direct impact on what we're feeling physically. And it still shocks me that a lot of people still kind of aren't on that page yet or don't understand it or think it's pseudoscience or it's kind of like, oh, like it's in your head or this or that. It's fascinating too, if we do go to the doctor, that it is just, do you need a prescription? Do you need this? What's going to just mask or suppress the symptoms for a while and not get to the root cause? And also not have the doctor do like an emotional, mental, diagnosis or even just a questioning of, well, what's been going on in your life? How are you feeling? What's your stress level like? You
right.
know, or even going further and finding out some trauma and what's going on there, what you've experienced in the past, things like that. It's still like wild to me that I don't think we've quite caught up yet. I think it's getting better, but I think we still have a long way to go for sure.
Well, I'll say this. I've been in the career of, natural alternative health for a while, and it is very, very difficult to change people's behaviors and lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so, to the doctor's defense, they have very limited time in the structure that essentially we've created. The
Yeah.
structure is people don't pay much for healthcare. They have insurance. They pay copays. So their out-of-pocket expense is like what, $20, $25 or whatever the copays are. They go, they have their 20-minute appointment with their doctor, and maybe they're in the room with the actual doctor for about 10 minutes.
Yeah, 30
Usually it's
minutes.
like someone else who brings them into the room that takes their height and weight and
Yeah.
asks them some questions. And then the doctor comes in, they spend about 10 minutes with them, and then someone else kind of types up the notes, and then they leave and they go to the next room. And basically insurance is paying for that. And then there's the administrative people that are basically billing the insurance companies for that visit,
Yeah.
and then sending that person to the CVS or Walgreens to go get the prescription that the doctor recommended based on that 10-minute conversation. And
Yeah.
so the structure is really designed for failure.
Yeah.
And if
And
you
keeping people sick.
adhere to the laws of the structure, you're going to fail. So that's why I don't adhere to any of the rules of the structure. I don't go do primary care doctor appointments like that. I don't give a shit about insurance. The insurance that I have is for emergency use only. It's for
Yeah.
like an accident or something of that nature. It could definitely be helpful and come into hand. But I'm not going to rely on a 10-minute visit with a medical doctor for him to basically diagnose what may or may not be going on in my body. It's my responsibility.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to get there. And until the rest of the country starts to really get there, we're not going to really see any dramatic change.
Yeah.
But yes, our mindset and should I say, our changes in behavior is ultimately what's going to make the difference. So if we don't take responsibility, like we'll always be in the same position. But yes, think about somebody in your life that is extremely negative. Their outlook and view of life is just negative, 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 negative. We know people like that. You know, we have them in our families, in our networks. I mean, hopefully we're not spending too much time with them,
Yeah.
but we know who they are. Take a look at like their health.
Yeah.
Like, are they in optimal health? Are they
Right.
feeling great? Are they thriving? Are they winning in all the areas of life? No way.
Yeah.
So our perception, our perspective, how we see things, how we see ourselves, um, plays a very significant role in our physical health. And so I
Yeah.
had to make that connection, and that was really important. And once I made that connection, I started to know where to look, at least explore where to look. And that was the biggest change in my physical health that I ever had.
Yeah. I want to shift gears a little bit and find out how were you introduced to the Wim Hof method? And can you explain a little bit to maybe anyone that's listening that doesn't know what it is, and also tell us, the benefits of it and some of the science behind it?
Right. And I love to tell people who are on their journey, and everyone's really on their journey. Some people just haven't quite felt enough pain yet in order to
Yeah.
maybe be forced to look. But when you start exploring and looking, people just start to pop up and show up on your radar, whether it's a new friend that comes into your life or somebody kind of drops a new nugget of like, oh, have you heard about this or explored this? Things just start to appear.
Yeah.
And I had already been on my journey. I was already exploring. I was already exploring with meditation. I was exploring with spirituality. At the time, I'd been exploring with psychedelics. I had already been introduced to plant medicines like ayahuasca and stuff like that. So I already was on this journey of self discovery. And Wim Hof showed up on my radar and really just showed up on basically a YouTube video that somebody sent to me and was like,
Yeah.
oh, check this guy out. He's claiming that he never gets sick and that he can influence his immune system and that, he was able to do all of these kind of amazing feats, right?
Yeah.
Hiking Mount Everest in his shorts, all of these things, and just all of these capabilities of the human body. And so I was just a young man that was intrigued by what this guy can do. And I watched the video and I was intrigued by his message and I was intrigued by what he actually was able to do. And so I was pretty impressed. And then I decided, well, stop being a spectator, just watching the video. Why don't you
Right.
actually just do the exercises that he's referring to? And so I started to do some self practice. And the
Okay.
practice was a very specific breathing exercise. And then he was encouraging people to do like cold water training, which was like ice baths.
Hmm.
And so me and a friend of mine who had a common interest would practice the breathing exercise together at his house in his backyard, who's also a realtor, by the way, here in the Valley. And then we would do the ice baths. And then we
Okay.
just started getting the routine of like doing it every weekend. It was like our own little like hangout. It was like our own little outlet. I would go to his house. We would do the breath work. We would do ice baths, and then we would make lunch. And it was like this great way for him and I to just hang out, bond, do something different. But what I noticed immediately is that I started to feel different. I started to feel this kind of electricity in my body that I haven't felt in a really long time. My mind started to feel like really clear and awake, very different than I had felt in a really long time.
Yeah.
And Wim's message was the cold is my teacher, was something he often said in interviews as I continued to explore, podcasts and interviews with him. And when I was in the jungles of Peru and I was learning from kind of the different shamans and shamanic healers that were, down there, they always referred to the plants as their teachers. So I was
Mm.
like, this is like this interesting thing that I'm hearing, over and over again.
Yeah.
These guys in the jungle, these indigenous native people who have this kind of unique knowledge about plants and potions, essentially, right? Keep referring to these plants as their teachers. And then this guy, Wim, like who comes from like a cold climate part of Europe, and, he was out there in nature and in the mountains, and, very much behaving almost like an indigenous man of Europe in many ways,
Yeah.
he's referring to this element of water as being his teacher. And so there's like this element of like plants and earth and elements of water as teachers. And so that was really intriguing. And so I decided to go down the rabbit hole, learn about the science of the Wim Hof method, learn about the exercises, practice the exercises. And then
Yeah.
eventually I went on to become part of his instructor, take his instructor course and become one of his certified instructors in the US. I think I was the third graduating class.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that about the kind of parallel with both of these teachers being the factor there is nature, and coming back to that, and something a lot of people are not experiencing enough or at all in our everyday modern lives, and something I think we really need to get back to, and a lot of healing could be found there. So you had mentioned one of the like first initial benefits that you realized after doing like the breath work and the ice bath was just that you were feeling better. You felt this energy. When we did the workshop, the rest of the day, I had so much energy. It felt like I was just like more alive. It was like
Right.
I an energy drinker, which I don't drink ever, and I do decaf coffee a lot because I don't really like that jittery,
Right.
anxious feeling. But
Right.
this different. It just felt like I was just energized and more powerful, and I just felt like I just had more energy, and it was great. And but it was a little strange because I was like, wow, I don't feel like myself. I feel because I feel like normally, especially later in the afternoon, you're kind of dragging a little bit, or for me, I've always kind of struggled throughout my life with feeling, some feelings of depression or just kind of like low energy feeling. And so that was something that was very apparent to me that I felt, you know, hours after. I know that it's also supposed to like boost your immune system. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I want to touch on the energy part, which is
Sure.
interesting. As I started to get into the world of cold therapy and being a practitioner and traveling and teaching, and now I've opened up 3 wellness centers in Arizona that we practice cold water therapy and saunas and red light and all these other things. We could talk about that later. But I really wanted to know, I said, okay, is this a fad? like this cold
Yeah.
water therapy stuff? Is this like the diet, that eventually loses its steam and then fizzles out? I mean, there's so many different workouts and routines and diets and ways to, improve your health, right? That we've been bombarded with. What's the story behind cold water? So I said, well, let me just look back into the history books and let me just see like what were humans doing prior to, say Wim Hof coming on the scene and
Right.
preaching all of these things about cold water. And so I looked in every corner of the globe, every single corner of the globe, from South America to North America to European cultures to African cultures to Aboriginal cultures in Australia to Asian cultures. I looked everywhere. And the one thing they all had in common is that they were practicing some sort of cold water therapy, either for spiritual practice or for medicinal practice. So it's actually been around for a very long time. And they all had different names for it, and they had slightly different practices, and they would pair it many times with almost like rituals or ceremonial practices. So I'm like, wow, this is really intriguing. And even in the United States, they were doing this in the early 1900s and the 1800s. They were using hydrotherapy and water cures, all before big pharmaceutical companies started to basically call all of this stuff hocus pocus. So it's like this big like propaganda movement that occurred. And so I just went further and further back, and there's a culture in the Andes Mountains, which is like present day Peru, Ecuador, and that region of the planet. And high in the Andes Mountains, it's very cold up there, and there's these big giant lakes. And in the lakes, they would practice these rituals where they would basically cold plunge before they did other shamanic, practices. It was like part of a process. And one of the things that they would claim that the cold water did for them as to why they did it is it would restore the body's vital energy. And so that feeling that you got from the ice bath is extremely common. And the science behind that, we can talk through, because that was essentially the main question that you asked. So just to give people an idea of like what is happening to your body when you get cold. And it doesn't matter if you get cold by staying outside, in the wintertime, say in Maryland, it's very cold there, or when you get into cold water. The difference when you get into cold water is that cold water will drop your temperature much quicker than air.
Got it.
And we all know this because if you go outside in 70-degree weather, it's nice out, right? It's chilly. Like it's nice. But you can spend the whole entire day out there. It's like not a problem, 70 degrees, But if I put you in, let's just use 60 degrees. That's probably a better example. But if I put you in 60-degree water, can you spend the entire day in 60-degree water? No way. You'll go hypothermic, right? And so cold water has the ability to reduce the body's temperature very quickly compared to air. And so when you go into, say, an ice bath, that like when we did it, it was probably 35 degrees. That is lowering your body temperature very quickly. And so your body knows that this is dangerous in a sense, right? That if you fell into a frozen lake, that is not a place where you want to hang out and hang out there for very long. And so immediately upon entering that water, your body will go into something called fight or flight syndrome. It's going to ramp up the sympathetic part of the nervous system, which is like the gas pedal. And because the nervous system goes into fight or flight, it almost feels as if you're having like a mini panic attack, right? You can't catch your breath. You have this kind of shortness of breath. You tense up. And the tension is you're fighting. You're fighting, or obviously you're just going to get right out of the ice bath and you say, I'm not doing this. So you're either fighting or you're flighting.
Yeah.
And so that is a very normal reaction to cold water. But of course, throughout the training, right, we're teaching a technique to override that system, to know that you are okay, that you are safe, that you're in cold water. It is for a temporary moment that we're going to do the training, right? We did 2 minutes that day up to your neck. And we're going to essentially drive the fight or flight response into a more calm and relaxed state. And the way we do that is by slowing our breathing down. I like to say closing your eyes to slow the mind down, and to mentally kind of let go of trying to control the situation. The faster you're able to do that, the faster you're able to basically just sit in that cold bath for a few minutes and it not be so stressful at all. Mm-hmm. And so what's happening inside the body is the first response is the fight or flight. And when you go into fight or flight, your body produces a neurotransmitter, and it's called norepinephrine. And norepinephrine is produced in large amounts, and it's a fight or flight hormone. And it also happens to have anti-inflammatory properties. So right away, it's basically reducing inflammation in the body. It's changing your mental state, because fight or flight hormone is going to make everything way more clear. Because if you're in a fight or flight situation, trying to think of like the 20 things that you need to do tomorrow is like not helpful. Irrelevant. You need to just become laser focused, right, on what's happening right here, right now. So this neurotransmitter is going to have that effect on you. Okay. You also get this big increase in dopamine. And if you go down the rabbit hole of dopamine, we are living in a very low dopamine world. You know, there's a lot of things that are robbing us of our dopamine. And so now cold water is giving you this boost in dopamine. So automatically you feel the effects of the dopamine, the norepinephrine, and that shifts happen on your mind. And that's the mental state that people are like, oh my God, I feel so good. And I struggle with anxiety, but for some reason, in this cold water, I feel so present and relaxed and calm. Where prior to getting to the cold water, they were like, oh my God, this is going to take my anxiety and 10x it. I'm like, most likely it's going to make you feel a hell of a lot better than you do in your own body right now. And so there's that element that's happening inside of the mind. There's a big release of the adrenaline, which is the norepinephrine. So it's got the anti-inflammatory effect, and inflammation is a very interesting topic, and it's like the root of many of our problems. Yeah. There's also science has been shown that it increases white blood cells. And white blood cells are the part of the immune system that is responsible for hunting and identifying pathogens. And so when white blood cell count can be elevated, it has been shown to be elevated for at least 6 days after the cold experience. So you have this long, prolonged release of white blood cells that are helping to fight infections and pathogens that you might not even know are in your body. Sometimes they also clean up sugar. You know, people have excess glucose and stuff like that as well, which is a big problem. We have lots of diabetes in our culture. Yeah. Then there's this whole barrage of circulation benefits. And, you know, we live in a world that we don't fully honor how important circulation is, because when was the last time someone asked you, so Olivia, how's your circulation doing? You know, like never, right? You know? Yeah. But if you have circulation problems, it's a big problem, and you know it, and you're probably on medication, and you're seeing doctors, and they're doing all kinds of different interventions to basically either thin your blood or put stents in your body, or unclog arteries somehow. And it's a big problem. And this is basically the largest problem that we actually have in the world, which is metabolic disease, cardiovascular disease. It's like number one. It's the number one thing that's going to get you. So if you take all of this blood that is in your fingers and your toes, the extremities, and then you get cold and your body starts to shift all of that blood towards the core of your body, because the body is so smart and the mind is so smart, it knows that your organs need to stay warm.
Yeah.
We need to take the blood from the fingers and your toes and bring it to the core and keep that blood circulating in your core, in your brain, in your heart, in your liver, in your pancreas, in your, kidneys. Keep the blood there so that that stays oxygenated
Mm-hmm.
and it stays warm. And so now you're having all of the circulation in your body move the blood. And so everything is constricting. It's like when you squeeze a hose, it's like
Oh,
squeezing blood
yeah.
to the core of your body. But what is also happening when you bring blood to a specific location? What is it carrying? Red blood cells, and red blood cells carry oxygen. So you're getting this wave of red blood cells, wave of blood in circulation to all of your organs and your brain to keep the body warm. And then when you get out of that cold water, one of the things we had you do was to warm up naturally,
Yeah.
move, horse stance, squats, these types of things. All of that now is pushing the blood back towards the extremities, which are your fingers and your toes. So you're giving this big system, or should I say blood highway, a
Mm-hmm.
workout by squeezing everything, vasoconstricting, and
Yeah.
then allowing everything to open back up. And when you
Okay.
have a good process of squeezing, opening, squeezing, opening, squeezing, kind of opening everything, I think they estimate in our body, we have 60,000 miles of circulation in our body.
Wow.
So just think of how many blood highway passages are apparently disrupted, lack, blood flow, lack circulation, lack oxygen.
Yeah.
And so now you're like doing this squeeze effect and then opening effect. And that's why certain cultures, they knew this. And that's why even the Romans knew this. And so even in Roman bathhouses, they had cold water, hot water. They would put you in cold water and then put you in hot water. And then you go from
Yeah.
hot water to cold water. And if you go to a Korean spa, they're going to put you in cold water and then hot water and then hot water to cold water. And if you go to Finland, they knew this. They're going to put you in a sauna and then they're going to put you in a cold lake. And then from the cold lake, you're going to go back to the sauna. And
Yeah.
then the Turkish people knew this, Turkish bathhouses, and the Russian people knew this in the banyas. And so if you look, you just find all these cultures of doing this hot and cold, open, close, keeping the blood highway functioning, moving blood, carrying oxygen, doing its job, delivering oxygen to the cells. And so for me, I think that's probably one of the biggest benefits of hot and cold therapy is just keeping your heart, your circulation, your vascular system, your arteries healthy so that they can carry the most important ingredient. The most important ingredient to life is oxygen.
Yeah.
And oxygen needs to get to every little cell pretty much throughout the entire body. And if you have a breakdown in that system, they're going to have to implant stents in you. They're going to have to do cardiac surgeries. They're going to have to put in pumps for your heart. They're going to have to reroute blood. I mean, it just becomes a disaster. And so those are just some of the highlights of what it does. But it also helps with weight loss and burning fat as well.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people are under, I'd say almost in a constant state of stress, high stress jobs, relationships, all the things that are happening.
Right.
What I know I've seen some chatter online or conversations that are kind of opposing cold therapy or ice baths for people um, that are already in a state of fight or flight or are
Right.
already dysregulated and saying that this
Right.
will further dysregulate you. What's your response to that? I mean, how do you feel
Well,
about that
here's the
argument?
thing about stress, and that's a great question. Stress isn't going anywhere.
Right.
It's not going anywhere. You can meditate every day, all day, read all the books that you want.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the stress is coming. You're going to get the bad phone call.
Yeah.
Financially, that might be a situation. We can't control the economy. We can't control, like, deaths, right? People pass away. We experience loss. Relationships, they people split, and there's a lot of elements of stress. So the real question is how can we learn how to adapt and react to stress in a healthy way? In
Yeah.
our culture, we're not necessarily taught how to prepare and deal with stress.
Right.
Certain jobs do, certain elements of certain jobs do, but even in most professions that deal with a lot of stress, they don't deal with it in a healthy way. Like, I
Right.
have a lot of emergency room nurses that I worked with over the years. They have a lot of stress. They have to make decisions in a quick and rapid way. They have a lot of responsibility. If they make mistakes, it could be critical. But the way they're managing their stress in most cases is not very good. They're usually taking some prescription,
Yeah.
to manage it. There might be out and about drinking, trying to numb some of the situations that they've still have in their mind.
Yeah.
They, yeah, they're just not necessarily training for stress. They're training to do their job in many ways, and you can look at anybody's life. There's no shortage of stress, no
Right.
matter what field that you're in. So, cold water therapy to me is a training ground for stress. It's teaching you how to adapt and react to stress in a healthy way. It
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean that you need to do an ice bath every single day of your life, although some people do that and they have, like, really good outcomes and it
Right.
works great for them. But cold water therapy is going to teach you how to go from, holy shit, I'm stressed because I'm in this stressful box right now, bucket, but actually I'm okay, I'm safe, I can connect to my breath, I can slow my heart rate down, I can slow my brain waves down, and I can be in a very relaxed state inside of a stressful situation. Think about an argument that you had when you were maybe in a heated moment with a partner.
Yeah.
What's happening? Your heart rate is super elevated, right? You're in that state of, like, I'm so upset with you and mad with you. I can't believe you did this, or whatever it might be. Your
Right.
brain waves are in what they call high beta brain waves, which is a state where there's no suggestibility. Like, you're not open to suggestion at all. It's a fight or flight element of the brain. And your adrenaline is, like, pumping too. And, like, we all can agree that's, like, not a place you want to, like, hang out in. And you're also very impulsive when you're in that state
Yeah.
too. You're very
Yeah.
impulsive behavior. And so people are getting triggered by everyday stuff and getting into these states. I mean, they're literally watching the news on their cell phone, seeing what's happening on the other side of the world that has absolutely nothing to do with them. And it's putting them in this state. Like,
Yeah.
not a good place to be. So, how can you take everyday people and help them to learn how to adapt and react to stress in a healthy way? Ice bath is one very good tool, not the only tool, one very good tool. Aside from the stress training element of it, you also have the benefits of the improved immune system,
Right.
um, the fat burning that we talked about, the metabolic health, the circulation, and all of that. And many of the top scientists will say that the cold water therapy is very beneficial and very effective because the studies support that. There
Yeah.
is this new growing movement that I'm learning that they're saying that cold water is not good for you. And I just ask everyone the question, what did humans do before 1950 then?
Right.
Because we live in a very sheltered world where you and I have the ability to go into our bathroom, take a shower, turn the water hot, and take a 20-minute warm, cozy, nice shower.
Holding.
Like we have that ability and we grew
Right.
up with that ability. I was born in 1979. For as long as I can remember, I can go into my bathroom and turn the bath or turn the shower warm. And I took warm shower. But that's not reality for human beings for the last thousands of years. Hot water heaters, which basically boil the water and heat it before it makes it to your faucet, have only been installed essentially in the 1950s and 60s.
Yeah.
Prior to that, what did humans do that lived throughout the United States? They either took cold showers, they bathed in cold lakes and rivers and streams. And now, granted, they did not take showers every single day like you and I do. We can take 2 to 3 showers a day if we want. People would go longer periods of time. We know that. Um, Even when you're camping, like if you're camping and you're not at a campground where they have like a shower station, like what are you doing to bathe? Like you might have to go like rinse off in that cold little stream down there for
Yeah.
a while. And so I've traveled all over the world and I've been to many remote areas. And even in present day 2024, not everybody has the luxury that we have where you
Yeah.
can just turn the water. So if cold water is so bad for you, how the hell is the rest of the world cleaning themselves for the
Yeah.
last 10,000, years?
Right.
And I just think that with any new technique or any new therapy, there's always going to be adopters and people who are going to push back on it. Now, is it a great idea that if you're like have the flu and you're sick and your body's already under like
Yeah.
duress because your immune system is fighting to go jump into an ice bucket and try to boost your immune system at that point? No, I don't recommend that someone do that. But as a preventative technique, to
Yeah.
use cold water is can be a great technique. And you know what you and I did at the workshop? We did
Hmm.
like 35 degrees. You don't need to do 35 degrees.
Yeah.
You can do 55 degrees. And it's cold and it's cool and it'll still lower your temperature relatively quick. And you'll
Yeah.
still get a lot of benefits out of colder water. So I hope that provides you some perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to be mindful of time. We're definitely going to have to do a part two if you're up for it, because there's so much more I want to talk about and cover. And I want to hear about your plant medicine experience and also just get some male perspective on some, other topics and things that we encounter. But I asked this question to everybody. This will be the last question. So the mantra of the podcast is expand on what serves you, release what doesn't, and just live. So right now in your current life, what is it that you would like to release and what is it that you would like to expand on?
What something that I would like to release? Well, one of the things that I'm continuing to like learn in my life is that most of the things are out of my control that happen in my life. There's many things that happen that are out of my control. But what I can control is how I respond to the things that are happening in my life.
Yeah.
So that is something that I want to continue to expand on, is to not get caught up in the things that are outside of my control, but making sure that I'm using all of the lessons that I've learned and techniques to manage my own like inner world and how I respond to these things. So I would say that.
Great.
One thing that I want to release is, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, one thing I want to release is just like I'm at this stage in my life. I have learned a lot, but there's still a lot for me to know. So I don't want to ever get so fixed on the fact that this is just the way it is. And I already learned this lesson that there's way more to learn, and that it's okay for me to look back and say that I was wrong. And with new information that I have today, I now know more. So I want to release the fact that I don't know everything and there's way more to learn. And it's important to be able to be humble and to know that.
Well, I love that. Thank you so much for being here. Can you tell everyone really quick where they can find you and just a little bit about like your current offerings as far as workshops, any classes, things like that?
Yeah, sure. So I am in Phoenix, Arizona, and you can find me on Instagram. It's probably the place that I'm most active. And it's
Hmm.
just at Michael_Roviello. You can see my name there in the corner. I own a place. I founded it with my buddy Jesse called Optimize, and it's spelled Optimyze. And we have 3 human optimization centers here in pretty much the Valley of Phoenix. We have one in Tempe and 2 in the Phoenix area. And we practice cold water therapy, sauna, light therapy, magnetism, pretty much all things related to nature. And we have an amazing community. And I teach the Wim Hof Method, and I teach water training, and I teach both here in Phoenix and in other cities around the United States.
Right.
So
Well,
that's a
thank you
great place
again.
to connect with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I hope to have you back soon. And I really appreciate your time and be well and take care.
Cool. Thank you, Olivia. Yeah. Again.